Hello, everyone. It is September 2021. We're on the cusp of Wave 2 release for 2021 of Business Central. Microsoft continues to just support an incredibly diverse and increasing array of tools and services. And I thought it would be a good time to sit down with some very smart people and talk about what Microsoft is offering. All of us are very familiar with Business Central and Nav, probably Power BI, maybe one or two other things. You've heard of Azure, but what all is Microsoft doing, and what can they do to extend your application and provide you an even better return on your investment around your Business Central and Nav products? Let's find out. We'll go around and do some introductions and then start talking about the Microsoft ecosystem. And I'm just going to go from clockwise in terms of introductions. We have Ben Baxter from Accent ERP. Hey, Ben.
How's it going?
Good to see you. All right. Thanks for joining today. We have Eric Hogard from eFocus.
Hi.
He's also our museum curator and lead technology historian. So if you got any questions about 1980s technology, Eric's your guy. We got Sean Dorward with Dynamic Consulting.
Hey, Mark. Hey, fellas.
All right. Thanks, John. And Tom Doran with Innovia Consulting.
Hey, Mark. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. So let's dive in, guys. I've been going at this for quite a while, and it took me a long time to kind of convert my nomenclature. I used to talk about the Microsoft stack. I don't even know what that is anymore. And I've heard more recently it's the Microsoft ecosystem. Hopefully that's the right term. Is it the right term? And when we say Microsoft ecosystem, what does that mean? Let's start with a just kind of basic understanding there. Who wants to jump in?
I can start. So Microsoft tries to make it simple that the base offering is Microsoft 365. Which is some sort of operating system, productivity apps, security, some enterprise-y bits to manage users and so on. And on top of that, you have kind of different, I'm going to use the word silos, and that might be slightly wrong, but it is also very correct. And there's big silo calling Azure, meaning that any cloud service offering from storage to compute to AI to data manipulation and all sort of things that are all labeled Azure, just to define the silo. Next to that silos, we have the dynamic silo. And some say, but Dynamics is now also Azure, but it's really, from that aspect, Dynamics is a customer, and they use Azure to make their things. And the Dynamics silo is also diverse because we have Business Central, as we all know, but we also have F&O, the old AX offerings. We have the entire Power Platform, and we have what used to be the CRM, but is now Dynamics CE, or for sales and marketing and all those offerings. So that silo is also very diverse. And then there are the odd ones that doesn't really fit any of these things. So Microsoft is still a company that is a big supplier of development tools. They do tons of things, and a trend in IT of the day is to sunset products and cancel stuff that doesn't sell well and so on. And actually Microsoft is not doing that. So there is tons of products that have their root in on-prem and are still only on-prem, but they still exist and you can buy them today if you want to. So it's very big. It's very diverse.
A lot of head nods going on.
Yeah, I'll chime in there. I think the big reason why people call it an ecosystem is the vision, the very old vision of these disconnected products becoming somehow connected or integrated. And each one of them, and there's a lot of them, and to some degree are embedded or integrated into or with one another, very similarly how you could put a table into a Word document. It's taken a long time to get to where we are. There's still a long ways to go. But if you think of it like that, there's just almost no end to what this ecosystem could do if each little business requirement becomes its own sort of separate functional application built within this ecosystem.
And I think that's a really good point to build on. The concept of a lot of what's out there started as, here's our ERP solution. And then they decided, well, let's not make somebody go in full force and do the whole thing. So they took components of it and broke it out into smaller bits. And so now you can just do one avenue of what used to be a part of a much larger bit. And so they're connected in that they started connected, but now that they've broken them into separate entities and their own service, you have to figure out the connection piece there. It'll get better. Dataverse and all that, connecting them makes things easier, but yeah, there's still room for improvement.
But, I think it was interesting, and I would just probably, as the most ignorant guy on this call, I'll just share that, I was at a conference, I don't even remember what they used to call it, but it was the CRMAX group. And they had brought Gartner in to talk about the future of software. And this is maybe 10 years ago. And they really started to use this term ecosystem a lot. And the whole concept was, in reality, every customer, they may not realize it, but they're going to need to share the data across whatever applications they're using in order to surface information for KPIs and reporting to run their business. And so what companies are best situated to provide an ecosystem of that nature? And Gartner's assessment was, look, it's probably IBM. And there's a name that struck me, but IBM, Microsoft, and General Electric is what they said. And it was about scope and scale and people that could deliver this type of an ecosystem. So anyway.
I want to share a picture of this ecosystem that I found. I'm calling it an eye chart. And I kind of hope it scares a lot of people. It certainly scares me. My first take is, holy cow, I had no idea Microsoft was doing all of this. They continue to add on, it seems like daily. And then, okay, how do you even make any sense out of this and take advantage of it? And that's really where I'd like to start. Like, is this doable? Like, for the average customer using Business Central and Nav, where do you even start with this? What do you do with this?
But I think you start by realizing that most of this is optional, right? So you. Nothing is forced upon you unless you decide to use it. And I do agree from a marketing perspective. How do you represent hundreds of choices? Should you offer hundreds of choices to people? But if what happened a couple of years back was that. What was known as CRM and what was known as AX basically exploded into a bunch of separate components. So now that when we look at this chart and we see up in the upper right corner, it says Business Central. We all know that, hey, that's a finance and AR and AP and a inventory and a fixed asset and Appsource stuff, and there's tons of modules within that tiny little box. But what Microsoft did, basically your number 2, 3, and 4, and partially 5 and 6 also, is the result of having two boxes being exploded into multiple boxes. And that actually includes one, a couple of the first up in box one also. So I think it's actually not as intimidating as it looks, because it's kind of, you get Business Central and then the customer say, oh, I want to manage my inventory also. I say, sure, we can do that. It's in the box. Where in CRM you get CRM for sales, and then you say, oh, I want to do some marketing mails. Okay, so instead of it's in the box, it's kind of needs to be added to the box because it's its own thing. But in reality, it's still in the box. It's just sold in a different way now.
And I really hope nobody starts here. This would be way too much to look at, right? I mean, it's the same thing if you took Business Central and just walked somebody through the capability guide, right? It's a lot of broken down pieces for an overall picture. And it's the same thing here. It's nice to know that some of those things are out there. Most people aren't going to use 90% of this. Same thing with Business Central. You get a lot of capability. You may not use all of it. That's okay. Just because it's there doesn't mean you have to use it. So hopefully people don't look at this and say, well, how do I apply this to this team? And how do I apply this to the other team? They shouldn't take that approach. They should say, what are my people doing? What do the departments need? And then come and try to find something that fits that need rather than force any of this onto somebody.
That's right. And honestly, so what should you use? That's a strategy discussion, right? And it doesn't start with the eye chart. Which platform are you going to invest in? Are you looking at Oracle? Are you looking at Microsoft? Are you looking at, this is a useful slide for that purpose, right? Where am I going to hitch my wagon? What's going to give me the most diversity and power in the future? Might I choose to use some of these pieces?
Mm-hmm.
So maybe menu is more appropriate versus iChart.
I agree mostly with that approach of having the strategy discussion first. What do we need to support in terms of our business? What processes, what strategic directions do we need to support with technology? However, as I've been watching Microsoft unveil these new tools and services, and really in a concentrated way over the past 5 years, right? Specifically around a lot of workflow, a lot of business intelligence, a lot of artificial intelligence, mixed realities listed on here. This is pretty heavy stuff for some smaller businesses, but I do think it opens up the discussion in terms of what we can do with our business. It'll provide ideas and opportunities that they probably won't be able to consider otherwise. What do you guys think about that?
I completely agree. And there's a few folks, actually, I think one of them is Sean's customer that I've been so impressed with, like on the AI front. And Sean, I'm talking about Clover, right? And their AI direct work. I mean, that's, you want to talk about an ecosystem and how people play in. There's an end user that has adopted the machine learning and AI to improve their supply chain dramatically. And then they've made some of these tools available for other users. And it's priced very affordably. And so now you're getting a level of sophistication that used to be reserved for, Fortune 500 companies that are available for companies that are, maybe as $75-100 million companies that can now have AI advised supply chain. That's powerful. And I think you see the same thing with some of their virtual reality, mixed reality type solutions. I think that one's been a little tougher to get hold in the mid-market. But certainly the AI and machine learning's coming strong, and we're strongly pushing people to look at that and to leverage people that have already created the engines.
So a byproduct of being in the cloud is AI, and I think perhaps it would be good just to define what AI actually means in this case, because we're not really talking about Skynet and killer robots and stuff like that, but AI in this context is a very, very specific thing. It's pattern matching, and it's the ability to see patterns in very large data sets. And we get this every day now. So if we take up our smartphone, go into our photo app, and then there's a search function, we type car, and it will show us a bunch of photos that we have taken of cars. If you take photos of cars, I do. And how's that possible? Because I haven't tagged I haven't written this as a car on any of the photos. That's because now all Google, Apple, whatever, Microsoft, whenever we shoot a photo, it rolls through their massive pattern matching AI engine. And so, okay, there's a match on a car here. And all these AI solutions are basically just pattern matching, saying, okay, now we know the pattern for a customer who is not paying his bill on time. This is the pattern. So now we can apply this pattern to all your AR data. So, okay, these 10 customers are most likely to not pay on time. But it really requires the data scale that's available in the cloud and the processing power of learning these things. Because the way it's learned is that you take two data sets and say, this is a match for this pattern and this is not a match for this pattern. You run it through a training engine that used to take, days. I created and back in historic time, this was known as neural networks, but nobody calls this a neural network anymore. Now it's machine learning. But I created an app, an OCR scanning app for Navision, and we trained it on letters, and the training took days. But that can take a second or something like that now with the way this is done in the cloud. So the fact that we have the scale of the compute powers to train these things makes it possible for these AI solutions to provide this. And it is not AI, it's just pattern matching, but it's very, very, very good pattern matching.
Right. AI, no different than regular intelligence. It's not always right. So when we try to do these pattern magic, as you call it, Eric, normal companies try to do this and have tried to do it for years. But only with that small amount of information that they knew themselves. And now there's just so much more of a value coming from this collection of information, almost unmeasurable amount of information. It's hard to find no value in that. It really is. And you have to admit it's not necessarily going to be accurate, but it is a metric that can be taken into account when making business decisions.
And some of it is surprisingly accurate. That's the almost scary part. That how good these patterns are getting.
Especially for those things like your example of the car. That's a useful and helpful comparison or example of what AI is. When you kind of think about a customer's ability to pay or expectation to pay, what that turnaround time is, those things, I agree, even that may seem harder to measure with a higher level of accuracy, but I'm seeing that increase over time. And customers who are afraid to start using it, like even though now it's getting to be more and more common for people to use this kind of vernacular, because a mom and pop small business, they're not really thinking AI until you break it down and really show them that value, and that is something they can choose off that menu of options from one ecosystem.
But a very simple. So my example with the car is actually incorporated into Business Central with item attributes that you can get them updated from the image analysis app. If you install that, then you got AI analysis of your images when you upload them into PC.
Right, but I also think, and Sean touched on something, the mom and pop, no, they can't relate to some of this stuff. But what they can relate to is I've got, a couple of DCs I use, 3PL warehouses and 2 manufacturing spots. Where should I ship it? And should I ship it from one of my DCs, or should I make it and ship it someplace else? That's when AI starts to really reveal some patterns and make some suggestions that have a meaningful impact, and that the mom and pops can relate to.
So another example that I hope to see soon. So you guys know Continia, document capture. Mm-hmm. And they are scanning invoices, and what you have to do is that you kind of have to create a template for this vendor and saying where on the page is certain information and how to extract the data from the page. And this is no different from what I did in the 90s, basically, or 2000, whenever it was, way back. That you kind of have to help the system. Okay, this is where the total sits on the invoice. This is where the lines are and the date and stuff like that. But with enough scanned invoices, a company like Continia would have the perfect training data set to create a machine learning application on top of this, and so we could get rid of the ability of the need for us to, okay, we got a new vendor, we need to teach the machine where the information is, and that would benefit the mom and pops, because you're just you put the invoice in and the machine will read all the correct information without, just like you would if you were just looking at it. Yeah, and then not even realizing that this is, AI and machine learning and all those fancy words.
I'll just throw one more comment here. When I said mom and pop, I think maybe I'm not the only one who's guilty of thinking someone who's been in business for a while, maybe not right out of college. The flip side of that is the younger leaders, younger business starters are nearly expecting this kind of behavior from their solution versus kind of almost having to be convinced to use it.
Yeah, but definitely a good point
there. Some technologies are, adapted by generations, and that's just the nature of it. My daughter just got her driver's license in the spring, and she has only ever driven and operated an electric car. She has never sat behind the wheel of a gas-powered car.
Wow.
So for her, an electric car is the default. This is how the world is, right? And I think lots of technologies are adapted by generations.
Let alone a car with not non-powered windows and not automatic door locks and whatnot. So
I went the other way with it. I was thinking you should get in like a Shelby Mustang from 1965.
Yeah.
So there is a manual gearbox Porsche with no roof out in the garage, but she's not driving that one.
So we touched on the power of the computing capacity in the cloud, and that's something I've been wondering about as I've been thinking about this topic. So just a quick aside, for somebody on on-premise nav or even Business Central on-premise, is this still a relevant discussion? Are there tools and services they can still take advantage of, or are they completely excluded from this conversation? And I know you really get to get down to the detailed answer to that, but is there a general statement you can make around that?
Well, long ago, I think they used the term cloud first and best, right? So will some of these things work on premise? They will. Will they work better if you're in the SaaS environment? They will.
Yeah. Fair enough.
At least that's our experience.
Yeah, 100% agree. And I think in the next 5 years, there will be a differentiation between on-premise and cloud, where it's not there today. Microsoft with the cloud first approach, eventually it's going to separate.
Well, BC in the cloud today is a better product than BC on-prem. It has more features. So those two things separated long ago. But one thing that's maybe an answer to your question, Mark, maybe not, but at least a comment to it is that with the cloud, we have to think in resources differently. So on-prem, we look at a server and think, okay, this needs to be faster, so we buy a new server with twice the amount of RAM or SSDs or a new SAN that is rated to something higher. So those are very, very specific metrics.
Right.
But cloud services now are being sold in matrices that are, hardware independent. The great example is SQL data in Azure. So you buy a SQL database and you say, okay, I want 10 DTUs, data transmission units, something like that, which is a performance indicator. And then so this thing is slow. So let me upgrade it to a 20 DTU database. Now it goes faster. Okay, let me upgrade it to a 2000 DTU, and it's way faster. So how Microsoft solves that on the back end is not my problem. I just specify how much performance I want, and I get that. So it's totally abstracted away from the actual machines, the actual bits and bytes. I just tell what I want, and then the cloud will give me that. The same thing with the machine learning stuff, that if you want to train something and you get the estimate that this would require 10,000 hours, do you want to complete it in half an hour? Well, we will deploy 20,000, whatever is needed to do this. So what you're buying is 10,000 hours of processing time, and which again is an abstract unit from the number of machines needed to deliver it.
I wanted to circle back some of the comments we were discussing earlier in terms of just making this real for as many people as possible, really. What are some examples of what you're seeing your customers do with these tools and services? And of course, the ones that jump out, and I think most people are familiar with, are Power BI, right? Power Automate, the what was previously called CRM, right? Customer enablement, D365 for sales, marketing, and so forth. So those are the real common ones. And I think most people are familiar with that. But what about some of these other ones on the slide in the big ecosystem? What are your customers doing with those?
Nothing. So looking at it, but not touching it. Yeah, I mean, they have a lot to deal with just within Business Central, and then you use what you need for the business. So Power BI being the first with analytics, then you get into automation, so Power Automate. Then there will be people that ask for things and want to explore, but a large part of what's on here, people are not going to jump into right away. It'll be years down the road.
We've had a couple of pilots with the mixed reality solutions. People were particularly the fields. We have a couple of customers that have large, diverse field service teams, and the idea that they could provide technical assistance remotely on the equipment that they sell has been really appealing. In full disclosure, it's been tough to get Microsoft to engage in the mid-market. We almost have to show the customer's balance sheet, like, yeah, they got the money for this thing. Because it's, $500,000 and up, right? Probably, if customers are listening, you should plan on around $1 million if you're going to do it right.
Wow.
But, if you look at what you spend to send highly technical people all over the country to do work, there's a lot of value in this solution. And that comes back to the strategy that we talked about earlier.
Right.
What should you use? Well, what's your strategy? What are you trying to do now? What's the business case for doing it better? And I think that's how you cost justify some of these projects, or at least that's what's worked for our customers.
So we're doing lots of stuff with what was formerly known as CRM. We have CRM running at lots of customers, and we see more and more that they are selecting things from row number 3 and row number 2. Like the field service module, for instance, which has, right, it's only really integrated to F&O, but since it's Dataverse based, well, we just integrated it into Dynamics, into Business Central. So we certainly see more and more traction on the CRM side, and it actually, so you can always discuss the quality of the integration between these modules, but it's only getting better. And if you want a real CRM solution, what we have in Business Central is crap and has not been updated for any usability things for 20 years. So if you want a great CRM solution, this is where you need to go.
Yeah, it's more of a needs-based, right, versus want. I think when customers look at the ecosystem, there are a lot of things that they would probably try to explore if it were, no investment, like Tom was suggesting. So I do see people certainly with CE marketing, customer insights. Very, very common is in that that one box where pretty much the Power Everything, virtual agent, BI, Power Apps is extremely commonplace anymore, and certainly leveraging Power Automate and the flows built in there. I mean, those are things that drive immediate value to a lot of organizations. So they're taking out a lot of the sneaker workflow and using Power Automate instead. And instead of building complete custom development applications, building your own timesheet in Power Apps, we see a lot of buy-in there for sure.
I agree. The no-code approach is really appealing to a lot of customers these days. That they can very easily build an 80% solution with the power tools, and quite often the 80% solution is enough for them to get through. This is something that is slowly spreading. One of my own apps is a way for customers, to add fields and do stuff on Business Central without having to deal with me as a developer or stuff like that. Because so I think the no code, low code, whatever. I don't. The low code sounds wrong, but the no code convention is really getting popular these days.
Yeah, anything that kind of can be quantified as self-serving, customers really gravitate toward, and certainly that no-code, low-code option is one of them.
And it's a lot of change from what it used to be, because people would not do that in 20 years ago because it would silo data. Now they can use Power Apps, create a unique function for a department, but because of Dataverse, all of that data is still connected. So you're not creating silos, you're creating unique functionality that still feeds the same data source.
It's the second time somebody's mentioned Dataverse. Would somebody describe that for folks who are not familiar with that term?
So Dataverse is the newest name for something that has existed for a long time. It's a database, and it's a shared service database. So it's the database that powers all the power stuff. It's the database that powers CRM. It's the database that sort of powers F&O. It's not powering Business Central. Business Central can be virtualized into Dataverse, but it's not the database behind Business Central. It used to be known as CDS, so the Common Data Service. Briefly before that, it was known as the CDM, the Common Data Model. And before that, it was kind of an OData access to CRM. So it's, and I think actually it had briefly, it was something with Flex Pro. I can't remember. There was a funky name for a week or two before they figured out that they didn't own the rights to that name. DataFlex, was it? I can't remember. Yeah. So it's just the CRM database. And from the Business Central perspective, it's a database that is fully supported from within. So we can, in Business Central, we can read and write any piece of data that sits in Dataverse. And this is how the integration to Dynamics C is working, is that the CRM database is actually will show up as tables inside BC, and all the synchronization code, all the replication stuff is done from BC.
Appreciate that. Now I completely lost track where I was going to go after that, but
Sorry.
No, I think it really comes down to, if I'm going to summarize a key point here, for the average Business Central nav customer, no need to panic, right? You're not terribly behind. This is an exciting opportunity, an exciting situation. It's certainly comforting to know that Microsoft continues to invest so heavily into developing new technologies that extend your current solution, right? The future can only get better here. But let's get down to really recommendations from your customers for folks that are watching. What do you do at this point? Okay, this is exciting. Lots of neat stuff out here. What do you do with it? What's the next step? How do you start stepping into taking advantage of some of this?
I think you talk to your partner. I mean, depending, if you're inclined to do a little homework, there's actually a lot of great data out there. But if you're looking for the cliff notes, just have a conversation with your partner. If you're not sort of deeply engaged in strategy discussions with them, at least get engaged on this topic, because then they can try to give you some advice around, what opportunities might be in the ecosystem that would help you.
Excellent.
And just to be that guy that if your partner that say, okay, we need to custom develop as the first answer without even presenting options from the ecosystem, then you might want to consider whether you're in the right spot, because we cannot treat customers the way we used to do with Nav 10 years ago. This is a new world. Sorry, Tom.
No, you're fine. Just kind of combining some thoughts there. I mean, this is what the value in a real partnership is between a Microsoft partner and a business out there trying to leverage everything in the ecosystem. Because really what's driving these requirements from a business is their operational and business goals. And we can help suggest and guide businesses to see and evaluate these solutions to see if they can actually be a catalyst for success for them. Maybe bringing in a HoloLens right now would only slow down things, right? Because of just where the business is. But maybe in 18 months, if we make these changes, we could be ready for something like that. The same is true for whether you're going to use marketing or customer insights. Maybe you're not there yet, but if it is part of your vision, we should be talking about that. So not only can we talk about what is available from Microsoft now, but as each of us on this call and any partners in this space should be doing is relaying that to Microsoft. These are business needs that we don't necessarily have a solution for, and quite often, if not almost always, we see something come from that. It may not be the cleanest or neatest at first, but we tend to see that. So I think just echoing what both Eric and Tom had said, I mean, it is a real honest discussion, but there has to be a mutual trust. And so if your partner is not giving you the right kind of feedback, it would be time to try to right set that relationship, I think.
And I'll do a counterpoint. Just because you have a discussion doesn't mean your partner should immediately try to sell you one of these apps. So there is a lot of functionality in a lot of these, and sometimes all you need is a field added or a page added, okay? Business Central is still a development environment, and you can still do a lot within the product without having to bring in a lot more complexity. Now, as these build out and Business Central sits inside of Dataverse natively, then open the door a bit, because it's all much easier. But until we get to some of those levels, you don't have to jump into this just because it's there and you think it's a good idea. Your partner may have no clue about what it is and just say, yeah, go for it. So just be careful. Don't overexert yourself on it. There's still a lot you can do just with Business Central.
Love that. Love all those statements. Couldn't agree more. And like I said, I think there's a lot of exciting opportunities, but don't get overwhelmed. Do get some direction with it. Let's wrap up with a quick recommendation from each of you. What's the tool or service on the slide that you see having the most impact, or you're most excited about, or something you just want to highlight for folks that are watching? And you can't pick Power BI. How's that?
Okay, so I'll start to not answer your question again, and actually just as my end. But this is actually to Ben's points here, that we got this exploded chart, and one of the benefits of this, well, one of Microsoft's benefits for this is that each of these boxes has a price tag, right? So it's a separate service with a separate monthly cost associated to it. And I totally agree, Ben, and I think it's perhaps self-regulating that you're not going to select a box for $100 per user per month to add a new field, right? Then you'll add a field. So this is not a free fall. This is on this whole chart. I think the cheapest one is probably Business Central when it comes to it. So as soon as you select some of the other things, you're in a much higher price bracket than where you are at with Business Central. So that's one of the purposes, I think, from Microsoft perspective, is that they are able to charge you separately because they have separated it. Anyway, it's just my.
It occurs to me, I didn't show the exploded view of the AI in mixed reality, so I'm going to do that real quick just to see the depth of that. But any other pieces to highlight or recommendations, folks?
I think the one that I'm most excited about is really AI around supply chain. And just a quick commercial, but AI Direct, they got it all created. This is an end user that's done a lot of this work. You check them out.
Wow. And I loved your example you brought up earlier, Tom, about where do you fulfill and figuring those patterns out. That was a great example.
And I'll just mention that, I know you said no Power BI, but I mean, certainly that is one. I think that's why you're saying it, because it's the easiest one to say. And I already talked about Power Apps, but certainly Power Automate. I mean, Power Automate is so embedded in other applications. It's even built in, embedded into Business Central. So, lifting and putting or workflow, those kind of things, I would definitely encourage that. And it's a relative. It's not as expensive as Business Central. I don't know what the SKU cost is, but to add it is might already be a part of your enterprise plan.
Yeah, good point. Good point. Ben, final thoughts?
Power apps. So the low code, no code ability to build out functionality, that's going to be huge. We talk about all these potential options to buy into. Power apps is one where you buy into it and then you make your own world. And you can do a lot with it. And it's a great starting tool, but you have to be the right customer. You have to be somebody that's willing to invest some time or pay for somebody to build something out for you.
Fortunately, Microsoft's produced a lot of sharp videos to demonstrate the hidden power of Power Apps and how much you can do on your own, and it's pretty slick. I think it's a great solution looking for opportunities. Yeah. I appreciate trying to take a very complex and broad topic and bringing it down to be digestible, folks. I want to ask, is there anything we haven't touched on that you'd like to share?
Well, I think, and we need a link below to the talk on Appsource, because Appsource is still a dimension that, yeah, it's on one of the slides as the last word, but it's so huge for how you deal with Business Central now compared to how we dealt with Nav. So it cannot be stated enough how important it is.
Yeah, good point.
I would just say that the people that own Business Central should be happy. They're in a good spot. They made the right choice, and there's a lot of room for growth, but they don't have to grow immediately. Stick with whatever plan they have in place, work with their partner to roll out what they need when they need it, but don't do too much too soon.
I'm a big fan of, go ahead, John.
Sorry. I'll just add one thing that you had on that last slide in the bottom left, what used to be called Office, Microsoft 365, nearly embedded in everything out there. You own it already, most likely. Take advantage of some of that interoperability as well.
Great point. There's a surprising amount of functionality included that you just never get to because you don't, who takes the time to play with it? Yeah. Last thought, Tom?
No, I don't know that I would add anything. I think these are all good suggestions, and there's no point in just talking to be talking.
Excellent. Yes, I'm a big fan. Look, take advantage of it. Don't panic, like Ben was saying. Sit down with your partner, share what you'd like to achieve, work on a solution. Just be aware that these great solutions and tools and services are out there, and continue to expand. So, folks, again, I appreciate you taking a very broad topic and boiling it down. Hopefully we've provided some inspiration and some direction. And as always, enjoy the opportunity to sit down and chat with you all. Thank you very much for spending the time and sharing your wisdom.
Thanks, Mark. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everybody.
Everybody, if you have a suggestion for a future huddle, let us know. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel. Of course, you'll get updates as we post them. And everybody, have fun out there. Stay safe. We'll see you soon. Bye for now.